Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with Eric Betancourt about becoming a game dev from Game Master.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Come one, come all to our live magical podcast in which we gave game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from real industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm your host here, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster at the Indie Game Academy, and joining me today is Eric Betancourt. Eric is a good friend, we'll say, at this point in time, somebody I've worked with in game dev a little bit, and has an interesting story to tell us about becoming a game master, otherwise known as a dungeon master, for a number of different organizations and eventually using that knowledge to become a game developer. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Eric. What are you having for lunch here today?
Hey, I'm out in California where it's 9 a.m. right now, so it's a little early for lunch. I'm just starting off with some water. But I was planning to, after this, make a big pot of chili for like today and tomorrow. So I'm going to get down with some of that.
Financially efficient meals, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm just a big fan of it too. Even though in the heat of the summer, you think that's like a winter meal, but no, I love the ease of it.
Do you like cool it off, or do you go full hot chili even during hot summer?
Full hot chili, melted cheese on top, sour cream cools it down.
Incredible. That's pretty cool. I have what have I been eating lately? Anything in particular? I do love my Instant Pot, although I don't think I've used it to make chili in like a year. Usually I go for just rice or quinoa and I just use that as a base, and then I like slap some pan fried whatever on top. That's my go-to easy meal.
Pan fried whatever is usually a great go-to.
Just made some dill potatoes the other day. They were fantastic. All right, let's talk about being a game master. So, or I guess even before that, as usual, the first question of each episode of the Indie Game Lunch Hour is the origin story. So before I ask you about being a game master / dungeon master and how that applies to game dev, I'd love to hear the origin story. Eric, how did you get to where you are today, and where exactly are you?
Sure. I consider you as well. We're a professional raconteur, so my story is going to be a bit roundabout in nature. But Eric Betancourt, he, him pronouns. I'm from the East Coast, and I've been a gamer all of my life. I'd like to credit like Pokemon Red with teaching me math and how to read before school did, getting it at like 2 and just figuring it out. But since then I was an only child. I am an only child. And so growing up, video games were my community, my escape. I remember like diving deep into World of Warcraft, so deeply into the role play aspect that like I'd play a druid and I'd stand next to a tree and I'd shout that this tree is my best friend. This tree is not just an object, a game asset, but has its own personality too. But I was so limited in what the game allowed me to do. I was limited to standing next to the tree, looking at the tree, taking a screenshot, but I couldn't climb the tree. They had not programmed that. And so finding tabletop gaming allowed me to take that to that next level and say, if I wanted to climb the tree, well, you can certainly try. You got to roll the dice for it. I've got a die here. I reach down. I just have like a big bag of dice at the ready at any time.
Do you identify as a dice goblin?
Oh, definitely. And I'm not particular about like sets of dice. I just like the random big bag that you pull out anything you need. And so I found tabletop gaming. And to give a little like precursor on what that means, I don't know if the audience is mostly video gamers, but tabletop gaming, although it's like the foundation of like video games, really, is played mostly in the theater of the mind. It's a conversation-based game that utilizes game pieces like cards or dice to give chance. And through conversation and taking on the role of characters, you play through that game. There are things that can allow for more visual understanding, maps and table settings and virtual worlds. But ultimately, this is a game in conversation. I found it and dove deep. I didn't ever consider it to be a career, though. I went to school to be a teacher. I taught special ed, fifth grade special ed for a few years, and I was happy doing that. But
Mm.
it wasn't all of me until I was able to start bringing pieces of that into the classroom. I noticed how some of my students were, gamers themselves, and went to gamify the curriculum, bringing in aspects of role playing games, and eventually just straight up playing role playing games as part of the class curriculum. And this was something I found a lot of success in. I was going around to like educational conferences talking about gamifying education, and then that led me to going to gaming conferences talking about educationifying games and how I was getting a lot out of playing these games with the kids, not just in seeing how, quickly they were able to compute things and chance and probability in their minds. That's like an easy go to, but establishing situations where they can learn communication, conflict resolution skills, problem solving, in environments that they wouldn't necessarily get the chance to explore in their regular everyday lives. And so doing that, the kids loved it. And then the pandemic hit and school was out
Mm.
and school was out. Not just school going out, schools were losing funding. A lot of teachers at my school were going to lose their jobs. And I wasn't, and chose to step away to like kind of save a role because a lot of these people had families. I was living on my own. I do not have children. And so it wasn't so dire for me to step away. But in doing that, I had parents reaching out to me to say, hey, my kid really needed that.
Mm.
And it meant so much to them. And losing school meant losing that. And how can we make that happen? And from there, I started the business. And I like to describe it as the way a yoga teacher, you can do yoga for free on your own. You can practice in your bedroom by yourself. You can do it with your friends. But if you want guided instruction by someone who really knows what they're doing and will give you exactly what you want from your yoga class, you pay $15 and you go to a group session. And that's what I established for my D&D sessions. I'm sure you can play on your own, and I would love to play in one of your games. Well, I know you play. You roll some dice from time to time, and I would trust you as my dungeon master. But I don't trust everyone, and it's
Mm.
not always so guaranteed that you'll get a good game. I don't want to toot my own horn. I run a real good game, and so I was able to build up a network not just with youth, but I have youth groups, adult groups, groups that are entire families that are playing
Mm.
together. And at my most, I was running 12 campaigns a week,
Whew.
36 hours of active game time. That doesn't count prep. 36 hours is nearly full time just with active game time.
Yep.
And so to think about what the planning went into that, this was a full time job. And I was making more than I was as a teacher. I found a lot of success in that full time. I've since stepped that back. But in stepping the pace back, I've brought in opportunities for partnerships. In being someone in the community, going to conventions and getting my voice out there, I was able to meet developers of the games that I was playing, not just Dungeons and Dragons, but other board and tabletop games. And they brought me in initially as a consultant because my background is in like concerns for youth, people with disabilities, DEI. Being brought in initially as a consultant on DEI fronts, but later on as ultimately a designer on aspects of the games and the mechanics themselves. I've been really proud of what I've been able to do in making that move, and I'm just copying because I don't want to like list my portfolio, but I will drop it in the chat. But yeah, and with that, I've been able to take that step from like gamer and teacher to gaming teacher to now teaching gamer. And that that impact is like not just with the people that I interact with in my games, but now in like the books that like my name is in, I know that it's reaching so many more people. And so that's been something I've been really proud of. And that's motivated me to take the step from board games, tabletop games, into video games. I was working full time with a gaming company, Gala Games, as their dungeon master. Like internal teams, every department had a game running. I was working with the C-suite on games, live events at their gaming conventions, had a Dungeons and Dragons section that I ran. And that was incredibly motivating as I was like around all of this gaming that was going on. I was creating effectively paper versions of the video games that were being made, but I wanted to make the video games too. And that's what brought me to you, Willem. You talk a good game yourself on indie development, and you hooked me, man. So I linked up with Indie Game Academy. In and out of the classes and programs, and I love seeing what you do. I look out for y'all every time I'm at gaming conventions. I was just at Games for Change, and I saw you had some representation there. It was good to see that. But yeah, I've been moving into indie game development, but it's a long journey, and I'd like to make sure that I'm striking right and effectively when I'm striking. I want to crit when I hit. And so, yeah, I've just been taking the time to learn and get better myself. We're giving young Saruman and Gandalf who is the good and who is the evil.
Well,
I think
at
that's
that point in
obvious.
time, I think the assumption is there is no good and evil, right? We'll find out later. 20 years from now,
Yes,
one of us will be the bane of everything.
they're both so young, so naive,
For
not
those who are
tainted
listening,
by the world.
indeed, for those who are listening, one of the audience members, Spicer Audio, says Willem and Eric are giving young Saruman Gandalf. Beautiful. What a fascinating story. There's so many people who get their start in game development through some form of tabletop or board game or role play game. Our own chief of product for a time, Claire, ran a LARP community for the longest time, and that's actually how they got started building games and understanding how games even happen. And I think like that's maybe something that people who jump straight into video game development, especially in like higher education, like they just immediately jump into game dev as a major or something like that, don't quite understand. Like we are, first of all, as video games, an incredibly young industry, but as a larger industry, the game industry, we're one of the oldest there is. We've been around since the beginning of time. Humans and even non-humans play games, and there's a bunch of different benefits to the playing of games. And I think like it's tough to estimate how valuable it is to do something like tabletop role playing, where you get this sense of why people do what they do, what they get excited about in a scenario, and if nothing else, you absolutely get firsthand practice at narrative design and everything else in the sort of story world. Before we go anywhere else, I would actually love to hear your opinions, your thoughts on exactly how exactly the benefits from your eyes, your practice of dungeon mastering or game mastering has applied to video games. How do you feel? How do you feel like those two have benefited each other?
When you look at like important stages in game development, one that is unfortunately often skipped is paper prototyping. We
Mhm.
go straight from like an idea, ideating on that, kind of writing it out, to then let's try to implement it in the engine. But that step of paper prototyping is kind of the final step in RPG development.
Mhm.
And I felt in like working with indie game studio with IGA, that stage of paper prototyping came super easily
Mhm.
and was a super fruitful stage in development because of my experience in playing role playing games and leading role playing games.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
allowed me to frame that experience incredibly intentionally too. Um, because the intentionality that you go into your session, your play session, which could be an hour, 30 minutes, 5, 6 hours, really matters. You could be stepping into it for fun. You could be stepping into it for a performance, if that's something that's like a streamed game. You could be stepping into it for that social emotional development that I was teaching a lot of my students previously, or and to kind of plug a group that I'm working with currently. I work with this organization in Poland. Forgive the website that I linked being in Polish. You can hit the translate button. Um, but they're teaching English through role playing games. And so role playing games are effectively a vehicle for whatever intention you want to put as, your cargo.
Interesting. Yeah, I am, as you well know, I'm a huge advocate for paper prototyping. I'm a huge advocate for anything that lowers the barrier to entry to game design and game development. And I think paper prototyping in all of its myriad of forms. For those who are listening who may be unfamiliar, when I use the term paper prototyping, at least, all I really mean is a codeless prototype, something that is not created in an engine. So a mock-up would count as a paper prototype. But the true traditional term means I'm sitting down with actual pieces of paper and planning out how this game will work. And that is still valuable, extremely so, for video game design. I'm a huge advocate for paper prototyping. I am curious, what are some of the, for those who are listening who want to get into game dev, what are some of the things you encourage them to practice? Is it just straight up, hey, go be a DM for a bit, you're going to learn a ton? What are some of the carryover lessons for a game developer from your own experience as a game master?
I think that it allows you to lose your ego a lot in forms of like receiving feedback because you get like such immediate in the moment feedback based on your decisions as a game master that your players are like live QA testing and breaking your game. Like tabletop players love to break games. QA testers in general do in video games, but it allows them to like break your plans, and you can start to see where people are going to break your plans before you lay them out.
Yeah, I can 100% agree with that. I think a good friend and mentor of mine, his name is John Rose. He introduced me to the concept of word prototyping, which is even more primitive, let's say, air quotes. I'm doing air quotes, you can't see, than paper prototyping. And a word prototyping is basically just role play. It is just a tabletop version of your game where you are talking through everything rather than showing any visual representation. So it's audio only or text only input and output for a game. And you can learn a ton just from that. And the benefit of that is that you can do that on the fly. You can be like, I have a cool new idea for a boss. Let me see if Joe Schmo, my friend and fellow developer, thinks this is as cool as I do. And just talk them through how they might interact with that boss. And that rapidity is super valuable. How about this? How does one get started with the lessons of game mastering? Do they join a D&D campaign? Is there some other way that they can get involved or to learn some of these same lessons that you have? What are the ways to pick up some of those lessons?
I think intentional I think intentional gameplay is just important for any game dev. Try new games, try games outside of the games that you play and make.
Yes.
Is just generally good advice. And so hopping into any tabletop game, if you've never played it, puts you outside of yourself and your own frame of understanding to help expand it somewhere else. And so even I would say even lighter step, watch an actual play, an introductory. There are specific, I wouldn't jump into Critical Role mid-season, but there are in specific campaigns on YouTube that are like catered to people who are interested in learning how to play, and watch the kind of patterns of gameplay and motivations for characters, and then take a step in yourself, try it out. If you see that as something that you want to be the driver of, then take a step into the dungeon master, game master seat. But I wouldn't jump in the pool without learning how to swim first.
That's really interesting. I have had a lot of fun watching streamed roleplay sessions. There was one by what is their name? The Corridor Digital crew. You remember them? They're like video editing. They're a video editing channel, and so they make a bunch of cool video edits. They had a side channel that I'm forgetting the name of, honestly. But they did a campaign where it was D&D rules, but the Pokemon universe, and it was hysterical and lovely. So if you have any recommendations, Eric, for first campaigns to watch, I would love to hear them. We can drop them in the chat.
Yeah, I love Dimension 20, the whole Dimension 20 crew. They're like local to LA, so I've like seen them play live. my roommate is the makeup artist for one of their players, and so like I'm a big fan of Dimension 20, and they have very approachable campaigns in a variety of themes. So like kind of inspired by real world 80s Howard Hughes movies. You have like villain campaign, you have New York City campaign, classic fairy tale candy world. And so like you'll find thematic fit for you, and they're great comedians.
Amazing. I've dropped the link in the chat for that, and we'll put it down below if you're listening to the podcast after the fact. Brendan Lee Mulligan is a master. Awesome. All right, next question. So most of the people listening to this show are game developers, in particular indie game developers. What are some of your core, like your 101 takeaway lessons from being a game master for so many years, especially in this educational, approachable space, that we can apply to our games today? What are some of the core tenets, the rules? How do I get some of the goodness of your game master experience and put it directly into my game?
I think the best thing I can say is step outside of yourself. I kind of touched on this before, but we fall into routines of understanding, not just in our like role on a team, but in our, thematic ideals for story types and ways of speaking even. And stepping outside of what you know gives you a chance to grow so much. And so if you find yourself kind of hesitant, I've never really been like a super creative person, I just like I want to handle the finances, and it's like, no, you have a story to tell, play a character that sings and dances and do a song and a dance every time they go into their rage, and try to push yourself to be beyond what you have been, because there's so much more in you. How do we apply that to game dev? Take on each other's roles. I've done this with groups of like everyone kind of plays someone else in the group for a role play session. And that could be, we play each other's characters, or we play each other. I'll be Willem and you'll be Eric for 10 minutes. And we'll do it in a way that comes from, of course, we set group norms at the beginning. Everything's from a place of love and friendship and compassion. And we're here for each other. But you play a little fun out of what is it like to be someone else for a change. I want to touch on like the homework that I was thinking.
Yeah.
Something that I do from time to time is lie. I love lying. And in this conversation, I've been incredibly honest. But sometimes when I'm like, I'll go out to the bar and I'll decide, you know what, today I did this like 2 weeks ago when I was in New York for Games for Change. I was Hector Vasquez for a night. Hector Vasquez is a structural engineer who loves bridges, who moved to Pittsburgh to be a bridge maker. And it's a tough decision because his daughter's in Colorado. And so he has to be so far away from his daughter. I have to be so far away from my daughter. But this is a decision that I make because I know that the structural integrity of the bridges around Pittsburgh is so important, and they have the most bridges in the country. And so I was going around talking to people about this, and that's not me. That's so not me. I do not. I think I said this earlier. I do not have children, and I'm not a structural engineer. I've never been to Pittsburgh, but while it was a little bit of fun, that's now a character that I can just pull. I got at the ready. It took me a while to build them, but that's someone I can draw from, and having people you can draw from within just expands the characters you can build, the way that you can speak, the way that you can frame your creative thoughts.
Yeah. Really interesting.
So that's gonna be my homework to the group is come up with a real world alternative to yourself.
Wow.
Who you can be. Extra credit, go out and tell someone that is you, and keep it going, and then walk away. You'll never see that stranger again, and they don't need to know that my name is really Eric. If it's a
They're going to see
2-minute
this podcast
conversation.
episode later and be like, I thought I really connected with Hector. What the hell? So by the end of this episode, are we going to find out this has all been a lie and you've made up all of this and none of it's real?
My name is in the books. I can pull out this book and see my name is in the credits right here. So
yeah, but maybe that was a lie.
Oh,
how deep is the lie go?
Pick it up at your local store. I printed this one myself.
Amazing. All right. So how about very, very fascinating. I love that as a homework assignment. I do 100% agree that exploring the boundaries of play and creativity absolutely apply to game development. One of my very favorite, like very early books for me was The Art of Learning by, I think his name is Josh Waitzkin. He is a chess grand champion and a Tai Chi push hand champion. It's like a martial art made out of Tai Chi that I didn't know about before this book. But his whole argument, his whole sentiment is that lessons learned in one area of life apply to another in ways that you may not expect. So he's playing chess and he's learning how to punch people better, and he's punching people real good, and he's learning how to chess better. And I think that's undeniably true. When you go out and be Hector for a night, you learn a little bit more about how to tell a compelling story or how to write lies into your game, and a myriad of number of different ways that may wind up applying to your game. I'm curious if you have any hard rules for applying some of your lessons in game. So, for instance, having a gender select option makes people feel more included, or creating a character that is confused and that's okay, like winds up making the world a little bit more relatable, or like anything like that. Do you have any hard rules for what we might add to our own game?
Yeah, I think that every character has a story. I think every NPC that is standing in a spot to perform the singular duty of handing
Mhm.
you this object, there's a whole life that that person lived behind that, and you don't have to think about it. But if you're trying to truly build a world in this game and not just place game objects in engine, that NPC has a whole life they've lived, and that can motivate so many other interactions in the game.
Mm. That's interesting. So there was I am forgetting their name. Rick, remind me their name if you can remember who this was. There was somebody in our last level 2 class that you taught, who their game was all about the power of language, and they pulled a Tolkien and had invented 6 different actual speakable languages in order to create their little teeny tiny, Vampire Survivors clone. So it was like level 2 is a 5-week long course. So we had people build what is more or less like a demo of a game, right? Very small little thing, tiny vertical slice. So she made 6 languages for her vertical slice. And like the game itself is fine. It's a Vampire Survivors clone made in 5 weeks. But the fact that those languages existed, had their own rules, and like were a part of the game was so cool. And that's the game that I remember playing that night, although I'm forgetting her name. So I suck, I guess. Rick, let me know if you remember who that was. But we can feel as game players that intention and that energy on the other side of the game dev process. Words of Survivors? I don't think it was.
No,
But
that's some
the
like Tolkien level like
yeah,
extra world building that matters. That
right.
communities are built around. People are
Yeah.
still speaking like Elvish. And maybe Tolkien's a bad example. I
People
think
learn
there are
Klingon.
probably people out there that can read the Chants of Sinar like script. You
Yeah.
know, I think that's kind of when you bring up that game, it made me think of Chants of Sinar and how they established whole written languages just for that game, and that was a touch that just pulled me in deeply.
Yeah. I think those moments in stories too where you get a little taste, even if you don't get a full glimpse of somebody's backstory, um, I think, that winds up mattering to you a lot. You get a little throwaway quote about, like, the day they had earlier, and then they give you the MacGuffin. That means a lot.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
Alright.
youngster Joey in like the beginning of Pokemon Red. He says like
Yeah.
I like shorts. They're really comfy, and that has become like a legendary line for the people because you didn't just make them. Oh, he's standing here and battles you. He also just tells you that he just like is comfortable in his clothes. It's a nice little touch.
That's so funny. Amazing. Any other, like, hard rules for how we make games better?
Um, I'm a soft rules guy. I'm a we there there's
Or any
always
suggestions? Yeah,
a
maybe not.
gray area. I think
Yeah.
like there's I think you've said this before, and it's like, don't be afraid to kill your babies, and
Mhm.
like depersonalizing. Like, one, make your stories incredibly personal, but if they don't reach people, that's not on. It's not something you should take personally, and
Yeah.
understand when you need to change and take be humble about. That's not really something I learned from gaming, but you can't take these things personally. Your game is not
Yeah.
for everyone. That's something I learned in gaming.
Honestly, that's a really good one. Your game is not for everyone, nor should it be. I think a game that is for everyone inherently is sort of for no one. It winds up being a compromise that doesn't necessarily like not all gamers like all games. Period. Um, I think the quote that you've given a couple of times now about the management of ego is also really important here. I agree. This is something that if you're a junior dev that hasn't done much play testing, you may not have learned yet. But the minute you've play tested like 5 times. It does not take long. You really learn a new relationship with ego because inevitably players will do things you never expected. Inevitably, players will not like things that you poured dozens of hours into. Inevitably, players will love things that you did like it was a throwaway. You didn't even think about it. And that unexpected nature of what the player actually does connects with and gets confused by, I think, is a real toxin to the ego. And I think you become a better game developer, designer, game master the more you can let go of your own needs and expectations of what the game should be. Your game is not for you. Your game is for your player.
Yeah, I think that's so much. I think that's so much more true when you're stepping outside of the role of a casual into like a professional. Like, I'm running
Mhm.
games for money. I'm not running them for my friends anymore. I'm not bringing to the table, hey, there's this thing that you're really gonna hate, but I'm gonna have a lot of fun running. I'm not gonna do that to my players. I'm giving them the game that they want, the game that they have asked for, and the game that they have hired me for.
Yeah.
And that's not always the highest thing on my list. It's never something I don't want to do, because I'm not going to do things that I don't want to do. I've been attempted sneak hired for some ERP before, and that does not fly. I'm not going to do that.
Wow.
But yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. It is always a process, and it is always it's interesting how, as a professional game developer, how many games I've worked on that aren't games I would necessarily go and look for to play. Right now, I'm working on a couple of different things, but including The Sims 4. And I, too, have many memories of drowning Sims in a swimming pool when I was younger, but that was The Sims 1, and I wasn't a continuing player that loved it, deep into its future. And yet, I'm still working on it. So that balance of making something for somebody else, I think, is a real distinguishing characteristic with somebody who has started to master their craft. If you're able to make something for somebody else that they will love, even though you may not be a lover of that genre or game type. Uh, all right, we're going to move into some audience questions. The first one that we have is from Amani. Amani is referring to your homework assignment, creating this character to be. How do you go about creating these characters? What's your process?
Sometimes it's really figuratively rolling the dice. For names, you pull through, go out into the world and meet people. Hector Vasquez, I know a Hector Andrade and an Anthony Vasquez, and bam, that's a good name that goes together. Structural engineer, I'm trying to think of like, what are some of the things that I haven't done. I've been a pretend zookeeper. I've been a butcher. I've been an animal husbandrist. All of these things have to do with animals. So what's something I haven't been yet? What's something I can kind of speak on? Engineers, they make bridges. Where are bridges plentiful? I look it up. It's like, oh, Pittsburgh has the most bridges. There you go. It's like one thing leads to the next, and eventually the variables become constants. And then just get out there and lie.
Have you ever been caught in the lie, and what do you do?
Totally. So this particular time, 2 weeks ago in New York, I'm telling the guy I'm Hector Vasquez because I'm passing the time waiting for one of my friends to arrive at the bar. And then once they get there, I turn to them and like, oh, my friends are over there. By the way, my name's Eric. I was just like kidding about all that. And the guy's like, what? You were like lying to me? And he gets up and he looks over to everyone in the he like knew everyone. He's like, "Hey, everybody, this guy's a liar. Get out of here, man!" And we just went to the bar next door. But
Wow, that's wild. That is a true, if nothing else, I bet that's a fantastic exercise in like social competency and social anxiety. Because I just imagine that you must get it must be stressful sometimes.
yeah, no, and I took that very well. We just lapped it off and
Wow,
moved on. But
amazing. All right, we
deceiving
have
people for kicks, I think, is not bad if there's no malicious intent. I'm not trying to scam the person. It's a he
yeah,
he.
just having a fun time. I would agree. I would not have a problem with that. I'd probably laugh my ass off if I like met somebody and they seemed cool and they were like, actually, my name's Eric. All right, we've got Rick up on the stage for our second question from the audience. Rick, what you got for us? Oh, we can't hear you. Technical difficulties, as
It's
always.
Rick.
It's Rick. He's definitely on stage. Oh, now it says you're muted. It is
Now
now
he's unmuted.
unmuted. We're gonna do a timer. I can't hear you.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll read for you, Rick. See if you can fix it so you can do some follow up. Rick's question is: can you touch on your experience of building narratives in games? How might you convert a D&D campaign or storyline to something that is a playable experience?
I think there are a lot of like incredibly direct, then adjacent, and then even further so like examples of this. Like the most direct is like you look at Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate
Mm-hmm.
3 and like the whole like Divinity Original Sin, these games are truly built to model the direct experience and engine of the physical tabletop game. And are vehicles for the stories. I think Rick, you or not Rick, sorry, Willem, you yourself are like working on like bespoke adventures in Baldur's Gate 3, aren't you? Yeah, so very they're like very direct. Uh Thinking more adjacent, you look at like Tiny Tina's Wonderland, the Borderlands
Mm-hmm.
spin-off game, which uses D&D in its like flavor, completely separate kind of game experience. And so there are those examples kind of looking at the fully constructed end. On the other end, I think of how I build my campaigns, like starting top down, like big world framing events that alter the world framing, individual actions that build into the events, the locations that those actions occur, the minute things that build upon them. And that's kind of my like narrative framing order of operations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I,
So you do
so
sort of
that's kind of
a top-down approach then. You're making the biggest decisions about what's happening in the world, what the MacGuffins are, what the potential problems are, what the friction is, the rules of the universe, and then you get a little bit smaller until you're all the way at the bottom making these tiny decisions for an individual NPC. Is that right?
totally. Because I've gone the other way, and just there's a lot more going back to change things.
Mm-hmm.
When
I
you
think,
don't set like the values and laws of the world, every action you then make falls in line with those laws and actions.
right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you have some of those foundational rules too, that probably is its own inspiration, a way to come up with some cool NPCs, etc. All right, we have Scott on the stage. Scott, do you want to ask your question?
Eric, yeah, thanks. You're a man after my own heart. This is exactly what I've wanted to do for ages. My question is, how did you get the attention of Wizards in all these games? Like, cold outreach application. Did they just come to you and say, "Hey, we liked what you're doing"? Right? Did they invite you in? Referral? How do you actually get, into that position?
Have you ever brought sand to the beach? They've got plenty of it. Every
Yeah.
application at Wizards, every job opening at Wizards gets literally like tens of thousands of applications, like tens of thousands. And so throwing your application is not going to be enough. I've said it a lot of times that like being in the room is so important. I see Willem in a lot of those rooms, or IGAs in a lot of the rooms that I go to, and I make it a point to like do the footwork and get to every con that I can, every gamer gathering that I can, and because you never know who's going to be at what. It's not so much of a transactional experience of thinking like I go to convention, shake hand, I get good job. It's no, you're just establishing yourself as someone in the scene, meeting others in the scene, building your community. And eventually, when you know the people because you happen to stand next to them, recognize them from a Twitter post and be like, hey, I like your stuff. You then know each other and can send a text when you do make that application. I've gotten interviews at Wizards, but my kind of contract work came from those partnerships that I established outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is
as far as how I did. Yeah, go on, Will.
Yeah, a stat that I use all the time that may actually be even more extreme given the current game industry, but at least the last time I saw this stat, about 4 out of 5 game industry jobs of any variety are filled by referral. It is super, super, super common for you to get a job because you know somebody. So yeah, go to the places where the people that you want to connect with would be, which a lot of the time is conventions and industry events. You can find a good number of those in your local areas, or at least in your closest city. And even if you can't find that, there's a good number of them that are online that still allow some form of connection and socialization. You're so much more likely to go to bat for somebody. Like I have people now and then reach out to me on LinkedIn and ask for a referral that I don't know. And a referral or really any kind of like job help comes at the like cost of the person who's referring you's reputation. Like if you're awesome, then their reputation gets upheld, great. But if you suck, then their reputation gets damaged. And so yeah, people are less likely to go to bat for you if they aren't confident that you're going to be awesome. So yeah, meeting somebody in real life and having a good, genuine human conversation makes them, I don't know if there's a real stat here, but 10 times more likely to want to give you that referral, want to help you into the room.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's like a safety aspect to that too. It's like they could want to, but like there's so many scammers online that it's like really tough to establish these online connections. I'm hesitant a lot of the time when people reach out, and I haven't like vetted them by an in-person meeting, and that's an unfortunate reality. And like the costs associated with going to these events are high. I say do what you can to make them low. Literally reach out to the conventions and ask. I pay for very few of the events that I attend because I've like established partnerships that either can sponsor me, or if I can't, I reach out to the event organizers just directly and ask for a ticket. And a lot of the time they'll give you one.
Huh. That's a great tip.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool.
Nice. Does that answer your question, Scott?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's all networking, referrals. Sometimes I'm tempted to say, hey, does your studio have a referral bonus? Because refer me, you got nothing to lose, right? Because if I'm great,
but you can't pitch on the first sentence. You have to be like, hey, how do you like Pittsburgh? You're in Pittsburgh this week.
Right.
You have to just talk about, hey, how do you like Pittsburgh? Those Steelers, huh? Have you checked out the bridges? It's really strong. The foundation of your company. I bet you don't. You don't get there so quick. There are layers of it that
a little bit more risk. And
you don't even ask in the first conversation.
Definitely not. I like to think about it like dating for everybody who maybe this will help you sort of frame it. You're not going to walk up to a total stranger that you think is cute and be like, hey, you want to fly to the Bahamas with me? Or maybe you will. I don't know. But probably that's not going to work. Better to be like, hey, what's your name? And build some sense of rapport and trust. And maybe on the second or third or fourth conversation, you ask about the Bahamas and blow their mind. Yeah, that's not going to be your first move. Build a relationship first. Yeah. That's what networking is.
And then my how I established like my network for games outside of the like just referrals from parents for my students I did a lot of, and don't do this, just like spam cold messaging people on like Roll20, Reddit, anyone that was like posted that they were looking for a game. I was in their inbox sending thousands of messages that initial like month or two when I was building my community. And so do that on an alternate account that you don't mind getting banned. And I'm not suggesting any kind of malicious tactics, but tactics that are like gray are totally fine. Don't be afraid to reach out to people cold and put yourself out there if you'd like to be playing games. And if you run a really good game, they'll sign up for you.
Okay,
Love
thanks.
it. Awesome. Thanks, Scott. We have perhaps our last question we'll see from Petunio. Petunio's on stage. What do you got for us?
Hey, uh, so hi. Thank you for taking my question. I didn't grow up with Dungeons and Dragons because they just didn't have it in my country. So as someone unfamiliar with D&D, what makes a great dungeon master and what makes a poor dungeon master?
Mm.
I'm sure Willem's going to have his own ideas for this, so I want to hear your answers too. But I think at the foundation is values of consideration, safety. I was a teacher for years and still do a lot of like large group lessons and facilitation around like DEI and leadership stuff. But when you're looking around the room, like at a class, I would always visualize balloons over every one of the heads of each of my students. And some of those balloons are falling really rapidly, some of those are falling really slowly. But each of those balloons needs to be tapped before it reaches the student. And you can think about your group that you're running the game for the same way. Everyone needs to be involved. And some people are going to lift their own balloons. Some of them need their balloons lifted for them to make sure that everyone is participating. So making sure that you have an inclusive mindset when you're running the game to make sure that everyone has a voice. I think that planning is not necessary if you're someone who can think on their feet. If you can't think on your feet, then you got to plan. And so you got to kind of be in one of those two camps, either be able to be on your feet or do the planning you can. I'm somewhere in the middle. I like to, do my studying to make sure that I understand the world that we're established in. And then I jump in and I'm ready to roll wherever they need me to be. And so having that understanding so that you're not leaving your players hanging when they need it, because you're also a storyteller. That's kind of the third important aspect of this, being able to tell a flowing, fluid story that keeps pace, that keeps people engaged. And that could mean like bringing in all of the voices that you need to be able to pull them in. But it could also just be in your word choice. It could be in your ambiance. Sometimes I like a scented candle. I get the sound of the fire roaring, some tavern chatter vocally, auditorily behind me to be able to bring in the mood. Maybe you like to wear a little costume or two. You don your cloak and you get kind of into the gaming spirit and take on the character yourself. But a lot of that stuff isn't necessary to run a good game. These are just like bonuses if you're not trying to tell a story. If you're not trying to come prepared, maybe you should just be a player, Be along for the ride. Unfortunately, the role of dungeon master, people are kind of daunted by it, and it's intimidating to be in the driver's seat, especially if you're not confident in your ability. But someone needs to run the game, so a lot of people get thrown into it. But yeah, do your best to tell a good story, keep everyone involved, do the prep, and I think those are the three like foundational tenets for me. Willem, you have anything to add?
I mean, I think you pretty much nailed it. Yeah, my favorite DM is actually my older brother, who I've been being DM'd by since I was, I don't know, 5 or something. And he does a tremendous job. I think this is I think something that we alluded to earlier in the episode is the biggest thing that I would say here, which is that a good dungeon master is telling a story that's not about them and not for them, but is for the players and is about the players and is about all the players. It's like one of the things I really love that my brother does is he attempts to incorporate player choice as much as possible. There's times that he will just be like, that doesn't work. But for the most part, whatever you try to do is going to do something, even if it's sort of a failure. So like he had a character who was just like straight up evil at one point and basically got himself killed by being an idiot. And instead of like killing off that character and doing a permadeath, he wound up having that character lose an arm and having that player stay out of the game for 2 sessions and then come back in. And so it was this big exciting reveal. And this player's stupid choice that another DM may have just killed off became a really interesting subplot that we were all like obsessed with, and trying to figure out like, well, what the hell happened? Where was he? And I think that's really the biggest thing. It's the loss of ego again. The dungeon master is not there to railroad their players into a setting that they find really interesting and want to tell. A dungeon master is there to create a compelling experience for their players, and that's exactly what a game developer is as well.
And like there's that you brought up railroad, the kind of toss between having a completely open experience and one that's set on a linear path. There are times when the linear path is okay, and a lot of our video games are linear paths. Time Crisis is very literally on rails, but for like one-shot experiences for one-day D&D games, on rails is usually all right. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's
even
just
better
about
sometimes.
the intention of your game.
Yeah. Love it. All right. I think that about, did that answer your question, Petunia?
It sure did. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you. Awesome. All right. I think it's about time for us to wrap up. So you already told us our homework. Will you remind us of what our homework assignment is before we say goodbye, Eric?
Sure thing. I'd like you to create a new you, an alternate self. This doesn't have to be, Rappalore Windward, a rogue from the Sword Coast, but, like I brought up my Hector Vasquez, a structural engineer working on bridges from Pittsburgh. Think of a new you, one that you could embody, perhaps. And extra credit would be to go out into the real world and let someone know that that's you. Introduce yourself as such.
I love that. All right. So write us up a name and a bio, maybe some background information about this new you. And if you're feeling brave, we would love to see you post that to LinkedIn and tag us. You can tag Eric Betancourt as well as the Indie Game Academy, perhaps myself, Will Delventhal, and we will think it is hilarious and cute. This is a way for you to practice some of what we just talked about here for the last hour. So we'd love to see you give it a try. You can, of course, post it here in the Discord as well, and we'll think it's great as well. I'm going to have to think about that one. I don't know if I have the courage to walk into a bar as Smorgasbord, but I'll consider it.
I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't believe you if you told me your name was Smorgasbord. Maybe in Brooklyn you can get away with that, but I don't know if in the South that doesn't fly.
All right. So it's time for us to wrap up. Eric, is there anything you'd like to plug or any last words of wisdom you'd like to give us before we say goodbye?
Yeah, no, I'd highly recommend people jump into a tabletop game. It's easier than ever to get involved. You can look up games online. If you'd like to play with me, reach out. I'm open.
Awesome. We're going to drop the websites that were mentioned, including RicoRicoRPG.com, in the description down below if you're listening to the podcast after the fact. So go and check out Rico. It's been a fantastic episode, Eric. Thank you so much. You don't have any last words of encouragement, perhaps, for the game devs out there?
You are so much more than you have been, and every step forward brings you closer to what you could be. So thank you.
That. Beautiful. Journey, not destination. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for being here, Eric, and giving us your opinions. Thank you to those who asked your own questions. Yes, and thank you, listeners, for listening. As always, if you enjoyed, we ask that you send us along to just one other person. Send this link out for us. Help us get out there and reach some more ears. Who is somebody who would enjoy Eric's wisdom on being a game master? All right. Big love, everybody. Thank you for your time. We'll see you again next week, 12 p.m. Eastern Time in the Discord every single week. Join the link down below. Goodbye.